And boom, Joker cosplay achieved. Hello, my name is Pablo. This over here is Milo. Today we're going to do a tutorial on how to make a color picker. So the color picker we're going to make, you can use it from any UI, and basically it'll allow you to change colors and whatever you want. And it's very customizable because it all relies on this image right here. So we're going to use an image as the base of our color picker. And the way it'll work is basically we'll convert the position of the mouse into a coordinate inside of our texture, and then grab the color from that pixel and use that for a color picker. So let's start by creating a new scene. Click on here to see it in 2D because we're going to be doing UI stuffs. And then over here you can right click UI and then add a canvas. And the canvas is basically what's going to contain our UI. So inside of the canvas you can right click here and say create UI, and let's create a few images. So this image here is just going to be background, and let's give this a nice little color. I am very partial towards purple, so I'll choose that, but you can choose whatever you please. And we want the background to cover the whole canvas, so we can open here, which is the anchoring for it. And when you hover over this one, which is a stretch, you can hold Shift and Alt, which will also change the position and the stretching. And boop, as you can see, it fills out the screen. Then we right click, let's add a couple more images. An image right here, and we're gonna just like move it over here. I'm gonna call this color preview. And finally, the most important one of all, we're gonna add an image here. We're gonna call this the color picker. Let's make this a little bigger so that we can see our colors. Okay, and for this, the first thing we did have to do is assign an image to it. So if I go here into my textures, you can use any of this, you can make your own. It really doesn't matter. This is the one I like the most, so I think this is the one I'm gonna use. You can find this color picker texture along with a few other ones I made down in the description. And also, if you ever want to watch more of my face, I stream on twitch.tv/PabloPoon on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Saturdays. Hope to see you there. You can use whatever image you want, but there's a few settings that you have to set. So let's select this one, which is the one I want to use. And the texture type needs to be changed from default to sprite, which as you can see says 2D and UI. And then since we're going to want to read the color on every pixel, we got to turn on a flag here, which is read write enabled. So let's turn that on and then just click apply. And you're going to have to do that for any image that you want to use it. So right now I can use this one, but I cannot use this one until I change those other settings. So I select my color picker and then I assign the sprite to it. Let's take a quick preview just so you can see how it looks when you run. As you can see, it's very simple, doesn't do anything at the moment. So to our color picker, let's add component and let's call this color picker. And it's a new script. Create an add. Double click on it so it opens in Visual Studio or whatever your code editor is. So first let's add using unityengine.ui. Then we're gonna cache the rect transform of our object. Rect transform is essentially just like a 3D object has a transform, every UI object has a rect transform. It's essentially the same except it's 2D, and it has a few other things like anchoring and things like that. Then to cache it, basically we're just going to start and we say rect equals get component and the type is rect transform. So pretty simple. And then we're going to want to convert a coordinate in our screen into a coordinate within that rect that we just declared. And for that, Unity actually has a library. So let's first declare vector2 delta, and then we're gonna use the library. The library is called rect transform utility, and it has a super long function here called screen point to local point in rectangle, and it essentially does what it says. So it's gonna basically grab a point within our screen, which is this whole area over here, and then it's going to convert that into a point within this smaller rectangle. And we got to pass in a few variables into it, the first one being the rect that we created. The second one is what exactly do we want to convert it, and in this case what we want to convert is our cursor position. So we're gonna call input.mouse position. Then it will ask us for a camera. The camera actually is like an optional parameter. So in the case of this one, we actually won't use it. Let me show you. So over here, if you go into the canvas, you can see we have 3 different render modes for the canvas: overlay, camera, and the world space. World space is like inside of 3D. Overlay basically just appears on top of everything. So we're going to be using overlay. In the case of overlay, you actually don't want to pass in a camera. So in here, we just pass null. And then finally, we got to put out delta, and that's just so it passes the result out into that vector that we created earlier. So to make what we're doing much clearer, we're actually going to put out some debug text so that we can see exactly what we're doing to this, to the coordinates here. So on the top, let's add using TM Pro. TM Pro stands for Text Mesh Pro, and is the way that Unity renders text. Actually, Unity has a couple different ways to render text. This one is nicer, so this is the one I usually use. And then over here, let's just declare public Text Mesh Pro U GUI, and let's just call it debug text. Then down in the update, we're gonna create a string. Let's call it debug. And then in there, we're just gonna add like mouse position equals, and then just pass the mouse position. Then in the second line, we just add debug plus equals. So basically we're just appending to it. Then we're gonna add BR, which is a break. And this will just create a new line in our text. And then in there, let's create delta equals plus delta. So that way we're gonna see what the input of the mouse look like, the coordinates of the mouse look before, and what they look after we do that transform thing. And finally, we just say debug text equals debug, and that will show us the text in the game. Now back in the editor, we go into our canvas, and then we add a new Text Mesh Pro, and that's the one we want to use for debug. And let's just rename it debug text, just so that things are clear. And then over here in our color picker, we have the slot for it. So let's just drag it in there. And let's move it below the color picker so we can see the info there. Let's make the font a little smaller. So now you can see as we move the mouse around, if I go all the way down here, you can see I'm almost to 0, 0 on the mouse position. Very, very small number. And then if I move all the way to the top right, you can see I go all the way to like 25, 55, 12, 36. So that is kind of like basically those are the coordinates within the screen. But then you can see the ones within the color picker, that's delta. And you can see if I get really close, I'll get close to the center. You can see I get really small numbers near the center. So that's basically kind of where my 0, 0 is. And then if I move to the corner, I get like 187, 184, something like that, which is essentially half of the width of the color picker. So the first thing we want to change is instead of having that the 0 on the center, we want it on the bottom left corner. So it's kind of like our screen. And for that, we're going to go back into our code and we say float width equals, and then this is going to be rect.width. We essentially do the same for the height. And then down here, we're going to say delta plus equals, and we're going to say new vector 2. And we're essentially going to pass half the width and half the height, so that we move from the center down to the bottom left corner. Let's copy our debug text, and we're going to add a second one. Let's just call it offset delta. And then when we give this a try, you can see now the corner down here, that's close to 0, 0. And the one up here is like 372, 373 kind of thing. Now the next thing we want to change in here is that instead of getting that 0 to 370 something, we actually want to make it so it's 0 to 1. And the reason for that is that will make it easier to convert then to coordinates within the texture. So back in the code, we're going to declare float x equals delta.x divided by the width. and that will get us a value from 0 to 1. And we're going to do the exact same thing for y. Delta dot y divided by height. And also we want to clamp this just to make sure that it stays within 0 to 1. So matf.clamp, and pass in the value, and then comma 0, comma 1. That's just to make sure it never goes above or below 0 to 1. And I guess it's easier to copy paste it, so let's copy paste it, change the values over here to a y, to height, and then this goes to a y. And let's put another debug down here, and this time let's make it x equals x and y equals y. Now back here in our test, you can see when I'm up here, we're getting values of 1 to 1. As I move outside, you can see the x is changing, but the y isn't because it's clamped. But you can see once I'm inside, essentially I'm going from 0, 0, all the way down to, all the way up, sorry, to 1 to 1. So that's great. So this next part might sound a little weird. Basically what we have right now is we took a coordinate from our whole screen, turned it into a coordinate in the rectangle, and then turn it into a coordinate from 0 to 1. And now what we want to do with that is get a coordinate within our texture. Now you might think that the coordinate of the rectangle and the texture should be the same because they kind of look the same. But the rectangle is actually scaling the texture itself, but the texture itself remains at its original size, which in this case is a 1024 by 1024. So basically we're converting our rectangle, which as you saw was something like 0 to 380 or something like that, and we're converting that into 0 to 1024. To do that, over here we gotta first grab our texture, so let's say texture 2D, and let's call it color texture. And to grab this, we're just gonna say color texture equals get component of type image, and then dot main texture, and we gotta cast this as texture 2D. Now down in the update, we're gonna declare int text x equals x times, and we're gonna multiply that by the width of the texture. For the texture, we do need it to be an int because basically we're gonna grab a pixel, so we cannot use a floating number. Since we need it to be an int, let's use matf dot round to int, and then just put it around it. Then let's just copy that line, and let's do the same thing for y. Let's put another debug so we can see exactly what it's doing. And now when we test, you can see now it's at the very bottom, it's adding a new value that this time goes from 0, 0 all the way to 1024 by 1024. And that will basically map inside our texture and find the color we're hovering over. So let's work on getting the color out now that we have the coordinates. So we declare color, and color equals, and then we're gonna do color texture dot get pixel, and then we're just gonna pass the coordinates that we have, text x and text y. And as a quick way to test, we can change our debug text to match that color. So let's do debug text dot color equals color. So as we move our cursor, now you can see the text below starts changing colors as we go around our color picker. So pretty much that is the basics of getting the color out. We still need to kind of put some hooks so that we can use it as a component, but that is essentially how you get the color out of the texture. So what we want to do now is, as I hover, I want to change the color in that little white preview, and when I click, I want to change the color on the background. So for this, we're going to need an event, in this case in particular, a color event, so an event that passes in a color. And Unity has a Unity event that we can derive from to use that. So first of all, we're going to add a little tag here for serializable. And that automatically added this using.system. In case your IDE doesn't add it, you have to add it yourself. And then let's say public, and then over here we say class, and we're going to call it color event, and we're going to derive from Unity event. And in here, we're going to pass as a type color. So that basically made it so now we have an event of the type color that we can hook up for different things. So let's make a couple public color event. Let's call this on color preview. Let me fix that typo. And let's make a second one, and we're gonna call this one on color select. And then down in the update, we're gonna call our two events, and let's start with the preview one. So we're gonna say on color preview question mark. The question mark will essentially just check if our event is null, and then dot invoke, and then we're gonna pass in the color that we selected. And similarly for the on color selected, but this time we're gonna say if input dot get mouse button down, and then we're gonna pass 0, which is the left click. And then if that happened, meaning we clicked, we're gonna call on color select, again the question mark to make sure it's not null, and then invoke and the color. Now back in the editor, let's select the color picker. If we scroll down, you can see we now have our two events, on color preview and on color select. And we can add anything to listen to them. So let's click on color preview. Let's drag the color preview object in there. That's that little white square over there. And then let's select image, and on the very top you can see it has a color entry. So just hook it to that, and now that'll respond to the color. Let's do similarly for the background. Let's drag that one into, well, let's create a new onSelect event. Let's drag the background in there and hook it up to the same thing, image, color. So let's give this a try. As you can see, as we move around in the image, now the color gets updated over there, and then when we click, it works. That's it. That's basically a color picker. It does have one little issue though. If I'm outside here and I click, it still changes colors, which is not exactly ideal. So fixing that is quite easy. Here in our update, we're just gonna add a new if. And we're gonna use that library that we used earlier. So the rect transform utility, and then dot rectangle contains screen point, and that basically will check if a point that we're passing in is within the rectangle. So we pass in rect, and then we pass the mouse coordinates in there. And then we just condition our whole code to be inside of that, and that's about it. So now our code will only run if our mouse position is inside our rectangle. There's other ways to do this, like adding a button or stuff like that, but this is a pretty simple one. Now when we click outside, nothing happens. And then as you can see, the label below is not even updating because the code wasn't running. And then when we move in, we can actually run the code that we had before. If you decide to use one of the textures that has the circular versions, you'll notice that they have a little bit of alpha around the edges. So when you're looking at it, you'll see that the text is gone, like nothing is appearing. And the reason is that right now it's grabbing the color from here, which is essentially invisible because it has alpha of 0. You see, once I move in, I can actually see the colors. So what you would need to do if you want to use one of these textures is you'd have to add a little extra code that basically says, oh, when I grab the color, if the alpha is 0, then don't use it. I'll let you do that yourselves. So that's pretty much it. That's all you need to do to get a basic color picker working. Let me show you a little bit how it works in context. So over here we have this little context action, this little platform. We press X, you can see this comes up. Did you see those interpolations? Those beautiful, beautiful. Let me show you those interpolations again, but this time in slow motion. What can I say? I love interpolations. If you don't believe me, you can watch my previous tutorial, link down in the description. So anyways, as you can see, I can spin around. I can select like the hair here. Let's change that maybe to like blue. Yeah, just the dark blue. You can see it has a little red highlight. So let me change those to a bit of a brighter color. That looks pretty nice. Let's change the suit into a red. Okay, that's looking good. That's looking good. Maybe a pink shirt. Nah, maybe let's go purple. I love me some purple. And then the leather chaps we can change to maybe like a, a lighter cream color. Maybe that would be good. There you go. That looks pretty nice. So hopefully that satiated all your color picking needs. I hope you were entertained and you learned something today. And I'll see you on the next one. Adios.
Well, thanks for stopping by. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell to be notified when new videos come out. Thanks for watching.